Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Tim Goff here. Along today, we have Alex Froome, as you can see.
Hey, Tim, thank you very much. And thank you for joining us today. So I really appreciate Tim calling me an expert on the TSPA. I'm just a contractor, just like the rest of you. I just spent some time reading it. Trust me, it's boring material. It's kind of like reading a VCR manual from the 80s. If you remember what that was like for some of us. For some of you younger guys, I don't know how I compare it to, but it's boring material, but it's important for us to read it and understand it. So I apologize in advance if my slides come across as a little bit boring, but it's important information. First and foremost, please remember that I am just a contractor like you. I'm not associated with FedEx. I don't represent FedEx. This is my interpretation of the contract. I'm not a lawyer. So this is just me reading the contract and saying, this is important to me, and I think it should be important to you. Second of all, my background, like Tim said, we both got into the business, back in the 2000, teens. We've been interacting with each other, at a route consultant expo in Nashville, right, Tim? Where we first met and got to talking and said, we need to do something just for line haul. That's where Line Haul Summit came from. Now, I do webinars with Tim. I've done some podcasts with Ryan Macris, and I do every other week, I do something with route consultants where we answer questions that are significant to the line haul community. This is dense material. Please put your questions into the Q&A. I will try to motor through these slides, and then, hopefully we'll have some time at the end to answer some questions. Okay, so this is about the Transportation Service Provider Agreement for 2023-2024. I think one of the things that's interesting that came out of the new contract is at the end of Section 2, they actually talked about what happens with a contract. Prior to this, the contract was called something that is evergreen, which means that it automatically renews at the end of every year, and then you as a contractor or as a TSP had the opportunity to either contractually just decide that you didn't want to participate or not. As FedEx tried to identify and develop ways to terminate contract with contractors for safety or performance, they came into some issues where contractors were arguing that the contract was evergreen. So this clearly states that if your contract is terminated for cause, for safety, or for performance, you are not guaranteed a contract renewal. Anecdotally, something that BDS has hinted at is that at some point in the future, all contracts will have the same expiration date. So, for example, if you look at your contract, or if I were to give you a copy of my contract, my contract auto renews every September 1st, just like everybody else. But my expiration date of my contract actually is March 23rd of 2025, which is the annual renewal date of when I first became a TSP. So something that FedEx is looking to do is going to adjust the expiration date of these contracts in the future for all contractors. It's not a big deal, but just be aware that's coming down the pipeline. So there's new language in Section 3.3. It specifically states that contractors or TSPs are required to drop or to hook and unhook trailers and put the equipment away. So prior to this contract, we actually weren't contractually required to hook and unhook trailers. FedEx could threaten you and could deny you your drop and hooks payment, but they couldn't force you to unhook trailers. Now, under the new contractors are required to hook and unhook trailers, and you can actually get into they actually has some teeth to it for non-performance of following your contract. And so if if FedEx really wanted to, they probably would have the ability to require you to have a letter to cure or an OTC for not following the contract and not hooking and unhooking your trailers. Security measures. Okay, so in our TSP, There is actually language that allows us as contractors to go back to FedEx and ask them to give us a settlement enhancement or a settlement adjustment to provide additional security to your business. So this was, I believe, came out of the in response in 2019 or 2020 to some of the riots that occurred, as well as some of the theft that was occurring on FedEx property. So you have the ability to, I've never tried it, so I don't know if it is successful, but you have the ability based off of section 3.4, if you put additional security measures into your tractor to make sure that they are locked and secured in the yards and stuff like that, you should be able to get reimbursed through FedEx. This is my favorite set part of this, the contract. So settlement is fully compensable. The language specifically says that the parties agree that the settlement set forth in this agreement will, without limitation, fully compensate the TSP for all of the time, labor, cost, insurance, materials, and resources expended, and for all other expenses incurred by the contractor in performing its obligations under this agreement. So, in essence, what they're saying is that you shouldn't be FedEx cannot force a contractor to operate at a loss, or at least that's my interpretation of this. So, this is something to think about as we move forward. Section 5.2. Okay, this talks about settlement adjustments. Specifically, both parties agree that you only have 120 days to submit your settlement adjustment. Otherwise, FedEx doesn't have to reimburse you for settlement adjustments. So it's not the time that FedEx has to respond to you. It's just that within 3 months of you identifying that there's an issue with your settlement statement, you must submit it in. Okay. So if you get it submitted in within 120 days, then FedEx is required to pay you. They cannot say that you didn't get it in time, or if there's a statute of limitations if they haven't paid you. The issue specifically is that if you've identified an issue with your settlement statement, you submit it within 120 days, FedEx is going to reimburse you.
One point on that, we've done some pretty in-depth analysis on this. It's true in almost every business that roughly 3% of dispatches are missed. Missed for what reason can always be argued, but by and large, network-wide, 3% of revenue goes unpaid unless you claim those settlement adjustments. And then even then you have a little bit of a fight. So do not ignore that. If you're $1 million business, that's $30,000 a year. I've talked to contractors who say, I just don't have time to work on that. Well, there's some automated solutions you could use to help, but the reality is you will most likely be impacted by that, and they will stick to their end of the bargain if you go past 120 days. So, Alex, thanks for mentioning that one.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some opportunities there. I mean, just to give you an idea, I do somewhere between 70 and 80,000 miles a week, and I, at a minimum, submit 3 to 5 settlement adjustments every week. So at a minimum, on a weekly basis, I'm submitting 3 to 5 settlement adjustments a week. I probably submit somewhere on the order of about 150 to 200 settlement adjustments a year. Some years it's been greater. Last year, I submitted over 250 settlement adjustments. And they were from everything from missing dropping hook to only having a solo driver on a team run to actually just having complete miles missing between point A and point B. So it's important that you get those in, and it's meaningful money. Like Tim said, I mean, 3% of all your settlement. If you're making $100,000 a week, that's $3,000 that you're missing, $150,000 that you're missing on that. $3,000 on a weekly basis or $150,000 you're missing on an annual basis. So it's meaningful, especially in this kind of environment where we have compressed margins. 3% is a huge amount of revenue that you're missing out of your business. Okay, so section 6.4 TSP personnel. This is pretty much a no-brainer, but understand that this is a contractual violation. You agree not to designate an A or a BC who is going to lie, cheat, or steal, is dishonest or lacks integrity, forges documents, conveys false tracking or shipping information, or falsifies DOT hours of service requirements intentionally. Okay. So these are all things that can get you to lose your contract if you commit any of these yourself, or if you knowingly hire somebody who knowingly commits this. Okay. So you can't say that, and this is important. You can't take the excuse saying, I didn't know that this guy was doing this. No, FedEx is going to hold you accountable if you hire somebody who lied, cheats, or steals, or is falsifying documents intentionally.
Just a note on that. I know contractors who have lost their contract over this, even before this provision was in the contract. So because of that, they have formalized that. They are not playing around. If you have anybody on your team that misleads anybody on hours of service, or letting one guy drive a team run or something like that, you will lose your contract if they find out. It's not going to be, no one's going to feel sorry for you. So please just keep that in mind.
Okay, subcontracting, Section 7. This is a change in the language over the last couple of years. Specifically, you as a TSP agree not to subcontract your obligations to provide service under this agreement without FedEx's consent. It used to be that, I could go to Tim Goff and say, hey, I can't run my load from, point A to point B. Can you do it for me? And he would take my spot on my dedicated run and go run it. That was something that happened back in the 2010s, and it was quite common. It's no longer allowed. Okay. Now, if you do get consent from FedEx to subcontract, which is very, very rare, okay, then the most important thing to understand is that you as a contractor, not Tim Goff, but you who subcontract to Tim Goff, are responsible for all provisions of the contract. Okay. So you are responsible for the service and availability of that load, not Tim Goff. So if that load fails, or if that load is not executed, then you will take the decline, not Tim Goff, and you will get hit with a 200-point failure. Okay. I'm sure there's going to be some questions about this. Realistically, FedEx generally doesn't like to allow contractors to subcontract, so it's not a really big issue. But just understand, if that in some crazy world where it happens, you are still responsible for the other contractor and for everything that they execute. Okay, statement of lease. This is important. Okay, every contractor needs to have a vehicle binder, and in that vehicle binder, okay, you need to have the statement of lease. And right now, as we switch from FedEx Ground to Federal Express Corporation, we also need to have the master trip lease in there. Okay, so that is one of the most important things to understand, is that you always have to have that statement of lease in your truck. For example, if you run through Oklahoma, and Oklahoma is known for this, and you don't have your statement of lease, you're going to get a CSA violation, and FedEx will assess it to you as a contractor, not to themselves. Okay. The other thing you can understand is that if Tim Goff were to come to me and ask me, hey, I've had a breakdown, I don't have any tractors, can I lease one of your tractors? Yes, you can sublease a tractor to another contractor, so that contractor can run the run. Okay. Let me say that again. You as a contractor can lease your equipment to another contract. There are very specific rules and requirements on how you do this. You need to have a statement of lease between you and the other contractor. That other contractor needs to actually have an insurance on your tractor on top of your own insurance, and needs to indemnify you. So you need to be a additional insured, just like FedEx is an additional insured on your own insurance. So this is something that's possible.
It's only possible, though, if that truck that you're going to lease to another contractor is on your Schedule B. If you have a truck that's not on the FedEx contract, you cannot lease that to another contractor unless you have your own DOT number. So keep that in mind as well.
Another point that's interesting, The TSP acknowledges that the amount of settlement for the anticipated but not guaranteed amount of services under this agreement fairly compensates the TSP for all such incurred operating costs, and that the contractor is responsible for payment of all its operating costs. So in legalese, what this is saying is that you as a contractor cannot try to submit bills to FedEx if your operating costs are not being covered by the settlement. They're saying that you should be operating more efficiently. There is also in Section 8 a clause that says that if FedEx doesn't provide loading or unloading of equipment, FedEx can require contractors to perform loading or unloading for compensation. Okay. I don't know of any contractors that do this. I've heard rumors that there's some line haul contractors who do spots where they load and unload freight. I don't run any of those kind of spots, so I can't comment on it. Tim, maybe you run a bigger spot operation. Have you ever had to unload or load trailers?
Yes.
Okay,
Not
so
unload. I haven't had to unload, but there's a pretty good percentage of spots that require hand loading. And in my case, we would load 300 heavy boxes a day, and we got a whopping $15 for that. It's a flat rate of $15 for anything that you hand load. It's a really bad deal.
yeah, okay, well, good to know. Lastly, this is really, really important and something to understand. If FedEx loses its operating authority in the contract, it can require contractors to obtain their own authority. Now, is this something I expect? No. This is more of a break glass in the case of emergency kind of clause that says that in the event that FedEx for some reason would lose its authority, they're going, at the end of the day, they still have a business to run, which is delivering packages, and they still subcontract or they use contractors to do that delivering of packages from point A to point B. And so in that event, they're going to use us as contractors. And so we are required to be able to continue to operate. We're going to need to be able to go out and get our own authority. This is your standard clause talking about confidential information, media and publication, and trademark use and protection. This covers everything from webinars that we're currently conducting to talking to the media. So just understand, finally, to doing trademark use. So no, it's not okay for you to make your own shirts. They say Tim Goff Enterprises, and then put FedEx's trademarkable logo and material on that shirt. You're fine to say, hey, this is Tim Goff Enterprises, and have all your drivers wear it instead of wearing FedEx branded material, but you cannot have Tim Goff Enterprises and the FedEx on it without getting FedEx's written approval. Okay, section 15. I know we skipped a lot, but the other areas wasn't very interesting and wasn't very important to me. But section 15 discusses termination, which is really important to understand. What are the causes and what can happen, and how does termination occur? Okay, so anytime in writing or electronically, it must specify a date. Substantial reduction in business. 30 days notice in the event FXG has a substantial reduction in business or elects to cease doing business in all or substantially all of a business segment or in the FXG hub or station area specified in the agreement domicile in Schedule C. Termination if either party becomes insolvent or bankrupt. Okay, so those are the three main reasons why FedEx can terminate you as a TSP, as a contractor, not for cause. Okay, we'll get to cause second, but if you decide to exit your business, you just can't stop providing business. You actually have to notify FedEx in writing, and then FedEx has to agree to accept your termination by a specific date. The reduction in business, I don't know what this means really, and I don't know when this could occur. There is also a clause in the agreement for like the event that there's something that say that there's a major earthquake or something like that. But I don't know what the substantial reduction in business would be that would cause something like this. I guess if FedEx were to decide to sell off the FedEx Ground, entity, which I don't think is ever going to happen. And then the biggest thing, the more importantly, is that you as a contractor can't go bankrupt. That is immediately a reason for FedEx to terminate you as a contractor. Okay, termination for cause by either party. Okay, so neither you nor FedEx can unilaterally terminate this agreement at will. That goes back to the earlier comment that I said before, that if you want to terminate your contract, you have to put it in writing, and then FedEx has to agree to it. Okay. Either party has 7 days to cure a written notice of breach. Okay. The following breaches do not provide an opportunity to cure: if you lie, cheat, or steal, or falsify DOT hours of service records. Let me say this again. If you lie, cheat, or steal, or falsify your DOT hours of service records, you will not be given an opportunity to cure. You can unilaterally terminate this agreement if FedEx fails to pay settlement or a contractor fails to pay chargebacks. Okay, so if FedEx doesn't pay your settlement on time on a Friday, you could terminate your agreement, okay, unilaterally. As a TSP, if you fail to maintain your corporate entity, FedEx can unilaterally terminate the contract. If you fail to employ drivers as W-2 employees, you can get unilaterally terminated. And then if you are caught violating the firearms or weapons provisions of the contract, you can get terminated. Okay, these are the reasons. These are the third rail of our contract. Do not do any of these things, and always make sure that you're employing your drivers and your employees as W-2, and always make sure that you're maintaining your corporate entity in good standing. Those are really, really important.
Yeah, this time of year especially, we go through this annual compliance check. You have really got to stay on top. It's really easy to forget to do those things of keeping your corporation state compliant with the state requirements. You cannot mess that up. And the other thing is that weapons thing, it's immediate termination if you don't get arrested. So I've known FedEx managers to make the mistake to carry their personal weapon inside the gate in their backpack, and they got terminated on the spot. So Alex is exactly right. There is no forgiveness on any of those provisions.
No, it's very important to understand. Okay, so additional terminations for cause by either party. Failure to maintain your insurance coverage. Okay, so you as a contractor are required to have workers' comp insurance coverage. You need to have general liability coverage. You need to have non-trucking liability and coverage, and you need to have EPLI. Those are the 4 things that you're required to maintain as a contractor. If you fail to maintain any of those, you are at risk of losing your contract. Bankruptcy or default on debt, FedEx is going to terminate your contract in that situation as well. And then any imminent or actual disruption or threat of disruption to a substantial volume of service where either party fails to provide prompt and adequate assurance of performance upon request by the other party. Realistically, this is more for FedEx's ability to demand to you that you give assurances that you're going to provide service to that contractor or to FedEx. Okay, there's really nothing you can do on this side. This is more for protecting FedEx. Okay, dispute resolution. This is really, really important. Okay, this lays out how you can dispute with FedEx when you believe that FedEx is violating the contract. Okay, so the initial thing that you do is you dispute. So you submit to your BDS rep an email, or a Word document or a PDF well written saying that I have a dispute with the following issue. I have a dispute with FedEx because I don't believe that they are correctly interpreting my IFTA for the following reasons, and I have not received, remuneration, in a set amount of time. Okay, that triggers a dispute. FedEx or BDS has a certain amount of time to respond to it. If you are unhappy with their response, okay, then you can file an optional informal dispute resolution. I know it sounds, really weird. This is the optional informal dispute resolution. Understand that this means that you're bypassing your BDS rep and it is going higher. It is going up to the regional rep, and that there is a committee that will meet to discuss these on a regular basis, all the optional informal dispute resolutions. Okay. They will, it's more serious. They have the ability to conduct investigations of terminals and stations to identify if there is an actual breach occurring. You also have the ability to call the ethics hotline in this situation if you view that it's a ethics issue. Finally, if you're unhappy with dispute and optional dispute, then you can go to arbitration. Okay. The way arbitration works is that you have to file it within 1 year of you as a contractor becoming aware that there is what you believe is a breach of the contract. Okay. You have to file it with it's filed with with the nearest arbitrator to where it occurred. So even though our contracts are with PGH in Pittsburgh, you do not file them in Pittsburgh unless you are a Pennsylvania contractor. I'm a Illinois corporation that operates in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Mississippi. If my event occurs in Mississippi, then I would file for arbitration in Mississippi. I would not file it in Illinois, nor would I file it in Tennessee or in Kentucky. You file it in the closest location to where the event occurred. FedEx Ground will reimburse up to $2,500 in arbitration fees. Both parties are given the opportunity to conduct discovery, including depositions. And then judgment is within 30 days of the hearing, and typically payment, if a financial award is going to be made, is there is also a timeline on how quickly the payment has to be given. So this is, and understand something. This is not you shouldn't be afraid of going to arbitration. Okay. If you go to arbitration, more than likely, no one other than maybe your BDS rep is going to be aware that you're going to arbitration. This is a natural progression of you of a contractor resolving a dispute that you have with FedEx in a mutually agreed fashion. This doesn't have any impact on your contract. If you have
Alex,
an issue,
could you give an example? I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you give an example of such a arbitration claim? I think you have some knowledge of such things.
Yeah. So I actually did not end up going to arbitration with this, but I was actually because I got it resolved differently. But I had an issue where I was having hours of service, or I had a team run that was a very long team run. And at the end of the team run, a lot of times FedEx would, or the other side would ask me to go through, which I was unable to for hours of service reasons. And because of that, I was losing miles on the run. And after having a discussion with BDS and going through the dispute resolution, it became aware that the other side wasn't managing their load board effectively to ensure that they were meeting their service requirements. And I was having a negative repercussion on my business. I was losing miles and losing revenue because of this. BDS actually suggested that I file for arbitration in this situation to address this issue because of something that FedEx was doing that was causing me to lose revenue. Does that make sense, Tim? And and anybody really wants to go in details onto this, I mean, I'm pretty easily available on Facebook or on Messenger, or you can reach out to the guys at Route Consultants, and they can get a hold of me as well, and we can talk about different arbitration reasons. Suffice to say that arbitration should not be looked at as a dirty word. This is a natural progression to go through, and it won't have an impact on your contract. Okay, this talks about the sale of a business. Okay, we as contractors agree that we must get FedEx approval to transfer the contract to a new or existing contractor. We have to submit, in the past, I think actually the form is still the same. We have to submit a BD 030 to our terminal manager, and we have to get approval on that BD 030 before we can transfer runs or the entire TSPA to a new or existing contractor. Additionally, FedEx clearly states it can withhold its agreement to approve an assignment if it will result in the existing contractor being left with only one assigned run or tractor in a location. So say that you are say that you're in the Billings, Montana terminal, and you happen to have three runs. You have two unassigned solos and one dedicated solo. You cannot sell your two unassigned solos and just stay with your one dedicated. FedEx more than likely will deny the transfer in that situation. Just by and by extension, there is a very good chance that FedEx will not allow a new contractor into a terminal or a hub just buy one run. They're going to want you to buy two at a minimum.
Yeah, it's not going to happen with one run. As a contractor under an entity, you got to have at least two runs. I'm going to make a prediction here. This may be an area for change going forward. I believe under the transformation that FedEx has learned that historically they felt smaller contractors reduced their risk. And I think what they've learned is that having a number of smaller contractors increases their risk and costs more money to administrate. And I think 5 years from now, we will see a network with fewer contractors, but they will be larger. I think there's going to be some scale changes, and there's going to be some huge contractors out there under one entity. It will be permitted. So you're not going to be able to get smaller and hang around with one or two runs in the future. I think we should all keep that in mind.
Yeah. I mean, you've already seen it, right? I mean, it used to be that you could be a contractor with just one tractor. After the RPS purchase, there was a lot of, you talk to anybody who's been around for, 20 years in the business, they all started with one tractor in the business and eventually grew. It's been a great success story, but now FedEx requires contractors at a minimum to have two. And I agree with Tim. I could see this eventually moving to requiring contractors to have a minimum of 4 or 6. I mean, this is just my, pontificating or, thinking strategically about where I think FedEx wants to take this business. And I have no insight to what FedEx is actually thinking. But, if I was, Paul or Jeff or Clay or somebody senior, that's the direction I would want to move in. Okay, the TSPA. Okay, I think outside just the outside of just the TSPA, I think Schedule A is probably the most important part of the contract that everybody should read. It really clarifies what it means to be an assigned run, what it means to have an unassigned run. Maybe someday will also be important to assign spots. There are very few assigned spots out there, though in the contract it actually talks about it. But Schedule A is really, really important. It really goes over, what is an assigned run, what is a dedicated run, what are URRs in the unassigned run, and then how they are awarded. So in Schedule A, Section 1.2, FedEx will designate which runs will be solo runs and which one will be team runs. Solo runs are configured to be performed by one driver in the tractor. Team runs are configured to be performed by 2 drivers in the tractor. And then each assigned run will have a specific tractor associated with it, and no tractor will have more than one assigned run associated with it. Okay. And then for purposes of the contract and for purposes of FedEx, when they communicate to you, assigned runs are a lot of times are called ARs. So be aware of that. Unassigned runs are called URs for the purpose of the contract, and URs are maintained on the unassigned run rotation, or URR. A lot of contractors call this the wheel, but understand that in FedEx parlance, it's the URR. Also, with 60 days notice, FedEx may change the way URRs are operated or URs awarded. Okay. So FedEx has the ability to change how they operate the URR, or the unassigned run rotation, with 60 days written notice. Okay, this is important to understand in this environment right now where they're adjusting runs. Designation, redesignation, and elimination of runs. As long as the origin and final destination of a run doesn't change, FedEx cannot eliminate an assigned run. Okay. So say that you have a bump with Chicago. Okay. As long as that run, as long as your run continues to go to Chicago, they can adjust your bump. They can eventually even come to you and say, hey, we want you to go through to Chicago. But they cannot eliminate it as long as they have a need for a run that goes to Chicago. Okay. Changes in dispatch times, bump times, and or bump locations do not result in the elimination of an assigned run. Now, if the origin or final destination of a run does change, FedEx is required contractually to eliminate the assigned run and repost it as a new run. So if you had a run that was going to, say, was bumping in Marion, Illinois, and was going to Chicago. Now, if that bump stays the same, but instead of going to Chicago, now it's going to Champaign, FedEx cannot just keep it the same. They actually have to eliminate the assigned run and repost it as a new run with a final destination of Champaign. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of questions on this one. And I'm sure there's going to be horror stories about people that, that's not what they did to me. And I'll tell you, if that's the situation, if they did not do that to you, or you had a different experience, that's an opportunity for you to file a dispute, go to the optional dispute resolution format, and then go to arbitration.
If I could just make one quick comment on that previous slide, one of the things that is a change in that contract is if you're a solo unassigned, they can now demand that you go through. I used to tell them I'm not going through at all. But now with that in the contract, they can ask you to do that. And that can be a problem for how you pick drivers for your unassigned rotation.
Actually,
most of those guys do not want to go through. That's why they're on the unassigned rotation. So it's another problem to manage that popped up in the last contract that you need to be aware of. That's a good thing Alex digging that one out.
Well, there are some caveats to that. Okay. So into that appointment. Okay. So FedEx cannot knowingly dispatch a contractor or a driver into an hours of service violation. Okay. So if FedEx has not informed you that you have to plan for the ability to have through runs, and and they haven't provided you with that information in writing, then you have an argument that they're violating the contract by them saying, hey, we're going to dispatch you through, because you have not been made aware that you need to have a sleeper truck instead of a day cab on your solo run. And you cannot dispatch a driver in a day cab on a through run because it's an hours of service violation. It's unacceptable, and it is an hours of service violation if you require a driver to do their 10-hour reset in a day cab. They need to have a bed for them to get their 10-hour reset. So it's either in a sleeper or you have to put them up in a hotel room. So it's something to be aware of. FedEx needs to inform you in writing that you need to provide them with a sleeper for the unassigned run rotation. Otherwise, they're violating the contract by trying to dispatch you into a through run. It's the same thing if like FedEx tries to divert you through a through run. If you are doing a bump, say it's between Denver and Dallas, and FedEx comes to you and says, hey, we need you to go through. Actually, that distance is probably way too long, so never mind. But, you get the drift. They cannot tell you to go through because they're knowingly dispatching you into an hours of service violation. FedEx cannot do that. In the contract, it specifically states that FedEx cannot knowingly dispatch you into an hours of service violation. Assigned runs will only be awarded through the posting, bid, and request for information process. In extraordinary circumstances, FedEx may, upon notice, make assignments by other means to ensure accurate administration of assignments. So, this was a point of contention at my last forum in the summer, but literally what it says is that FedEx agrees that in general, they're only going to award assigned runs through the posting, bid, and request for, and the RFI process. The RFI process is new. It used to be that they would only award assigned runs through the posting or bid process. Now, in extraordinary circumstances, FedEx has the ability to bypass the posting, bid, or request for information process and award an assigned run directly to a contractor. I don't know what extraordinary circumstances are. I've only seen it happen once or twice, where FedEx awarded a run outside of the posting, bid, and request for information process, and this was in a situation where FedEx eliminated an assigned run of a contractor, and they awarded that contractor another assigned run because they eliminated his current assigned run. FedEx doesn't have the requirement to do that in the event that they eliminate an assigned run, but they have the ability to often in this current contract, according to Schedule A, Section 2.5. Okay, servicing assigned runs. This is pretty much what it means. You have the ability to use any tractor that's leased under the agreement and is on your Schedule B to complete an assigned run. You're required to complete the leg of the trip within an associated runtime. Okay. The difference between the estimated departure time and the estimated time of arrival is always listed on your dispatch record or hook slip in MTA, or you can ask dispatch what the assigned runtime is. FedEx, if your schedule A1 shows 7 days a week, FedEx reserves the right to dispatch your assigned run 7 days a week. And generally, though, they'll notify you if they need to run it 7 days a week. But they have the ability to request it. If you're running 5 days, they have the ability to, and your run is has the ability to run 7 days. They technically can give you a decline if you decline to run on a 6th or 7th day. Generally, they don't do that. They'll usually work with you and give you a heads up if they need you to provide service on additional days. And then contractors understand that FedEx might divert assigned runs, change a bump, and turn into a through run or just dispatch bump times. If a contractor declines an assigned run, then FedEx will service the run in any other fashion of their choosing. They have the ability to either use the URR or they can use outside power. If an assigned run is cut, you can volunteer to put your run at the end of the unassigned run rotation. I understand that this is not always the practice in a lot of terminals. Sometimes in other terminals, they'll give you, if you're supposed to be running an Ocala, they might give you an Orlando to try to make up the miles. But realistically, as per the contract, if your assigned run is cut, you're supposed to go to, and you want miles, then you're supposed to go to the end of the unassigned run rotation. And for that day, the tractor will be considered as position extra and will provide a run only if all of the tractors on the unassigned run rotation have been offered a run. Okay, URR. This is part of Schedule 4 of this is Section 4 of the Schedule A. Unassigned tractors will have a position on the URR. Stations, given their small size, may not have a rotation, but otherwise there are typically 3 rotations: an AM rotation, a PM rotation, and a team rotation. Typically, the AM rotation is supposed to run. Actually, The AM rotation is supposed to run from midnight until noon, and the PM rotation is supposed to run from noon to midnight. Realistically, and in my experience, the AM rotation generally runs from about, call it 6 a.m. until about 2 p.m. And the night rotation generally runs from about 6 p.m. until about 2 or 3 a.m. And finally, unassigned run positions or URPs will be assigned to a specific tractor ID, and no tractor can have more than one URP. So in essence, what this means is if you have 6 unassigned runs in on the Memphis run rotation, then you need to have 6 tractors in Memphis. Even if they're not being all utilized, you still need to have 6 tractors. Okay, so the way the unassigned run rotation works is think of it as a wheel. Why it's called a wheel? Think of like a roulette wheel. You have positions 1 through 20. So each tractor is given a spot on that wheel, and the wheel turns as each run is each UR or tractor UR is given a run. And so the next day, if say tractors 1 through 5 have been given runs, the next day they'll start with tractor number 6. And tractors 1 through 5 will then go to the end of the rotation. Talking about the pause, in the contract, they actually alluded to it. TSPs may temporarily remove a tractor from the URR upon written agreement between the TSP and hub management. So the pause that they're actually talking about right now in MGB and MGBA, they actually alluded to it in the contract when it came out back in August. And this is the language where it actually gives you that ability. FedEx is pretty clear about this. There is no requirement by FedEx to offer work to tractors on the URR on any given day. Contractors are required to have a tractor driver available 7 days a week on the URR. And you cannot subcontract work offered on the URR to another party. Assigned runs and unassigned run positions will be handled through the posting, bid, and RFI processes, except in extraordinary circumstances. Okay, assigned runs can be posted to MGBA for bidding by TSPs with equipment at the hub or station where the assigned run is to originate. Assigned runs, URRs, and other URP growth opportunities may be utilized to bid on those runs. As it stands right now, though I expect this to change, FedEx will award assigned runs or URPs posted on NGB based on the following factors. 20% will be safe operations, 20% will be safety technology, 10% will be your service, 10% will be your availability, and then 40% will be your points for a total of 100%. You cannot bid if the TSP has not cured a breach of the agreement after being notified and provided an opportunity to cure. The bid period lasts 7 days, and you must have had a contract for at least 6 months and a tractor on your Schedule B for at least 6 months in order to be eligible to bid. Okay, the way the bidding works, I know this doesn't make any sense, but they'll take the top points. So say you're contractor A and you have 1,000 points, then that 1,000 points becomes the gold standard or the level for that 40%. If you are contractor B and you have 900 points, then you will get 9/10 of 40%. So you will get 36 points while contractor A gets 40 points. Okay, the way the safe operations and the safety technology works is the same kind of concept. You have tiers. So if you are a tier 5 safety, you will get 20 points. If you are tier 4, you will get 15, tier 3, 10, tier 2, 5, and tier 1, you get 0 points. So if you are contractor A, you get 40 points. And then if you have a tier 3 in technology, you get 10 points. So then you have 50 points. And the same goes on for safety technology, which is your FCAM. What level of FCAM compliance are you? And then service and availability thresholds. So you might bid on runs using any tractor leased to FedEx ground and domicile at the hub or station where the assigned run or unassigned run position is posted. In very special circumstances, you may bid on runs using any tractor leased within the network. This is an extraordinary circumstance, and FedEx will announce it through MGBA if this is going to occur. If multiple assigned runs or unassigned run positions are lost for business reasons, so they eliminate your run. In that event, you have the option to either convert your assigned run into a spare with points. So in this event where you have had multiple tractors eliminated and converted multiple tractors into spares with points, you may combine or transfer the points in order to bid on an assigned run. If you win an assigned run or an unassigned run position, then you as a contractor agree that you're going to relinquish the assigned run or unassigned run position currently associated with that bidding tractor. So say that you have a Toledo run and you want to bid on the Chicago run. If you win, then you agree to give up that Toledo run to take on that Chicago run. Or if you're converting an unassigned run, you agree to give up a position on the unassigned run rotation to take on that Chicago run. Temp runs, this is section 7 of Schedule A. Temp runs may be awarded to TSPs in multiple formats. Most importantly, temp runs are not supposed to exceed 270 days. FedEx regularly conducts audits to make sure that temp runs are not exceeding 270 days. There are multiple ways that FedEx can award temp runs. They may post temp run. They are not required to post temp runs on MGBA or post on a message board in the hub or station area. They may post the temp runs and then award them through an RFI process. And if they do follow those procedures where they're posting a temp run, then they have to post the temp run onto your Schedule A2. And as a contractor, you are not allowed to sell temp runs or assign them to another TSP.
My experience is FedEx is really bad about doing that paperwork. So you need to stay on top of that. Otherwise, you don't have a whole lot of recourse.
Okay. So this is my interpretation. Schedule A, section 8 and 9 discusses spots and servicing spots, and the awarding of spots, and the assigning of spots. Tim, you might have a different experience, but in my experience, FedEx does not follow the contract as it pertains to spots. I've never actually looked at the contract and seen the sign the spot. Tim, have you?
I have not personally witnessed it, though I have talked to FedEx folks who say there are some assigned spots, but it's there's few enough that you would be very accurate to say spots are never assigned. The other thing to keep in mind about spots is when you're looking at an entity that you may be interested in acquiring, or you're an entity that's doing spots, your spot revenue is very hard to quantify in terms of enterprise value, because FedEx does not have to give the person that buys your company, or the person you sell your company to, or however you do, or the company that you buy, you're not guaranteed that spot revenue. Now, most of the time in smaller stations, it's very difficult for them to do it any other way than they're doing it. And therefore, you can have a conversation with the senior manager and likely facilitate that entity sale. And the spots, while not assigned, the follow-on assignee would still be able to do those spots. That's the way it works most of the time. but not all the time, right? 2 years ago, in Olive Branch, a new local manager came in and he reassigned every spot in the building, and some guys went out of business. And so the spot world from a management perspective is really the wild, wild west. And it's fraught with danger for those who are trying to sell their business or acquire businesses that have spots. It's not been as dangerous in the past as it is now, giving all the turmoil at FedEx. So it definitely requires more due diligence. There's been some conversation in the Q&A during Alex's talk about spots, and I'm going to do some more homework on that and come back to you. But it is a very key point, and Alex's summary here is spot on.
Yeah,
Biggest point is that you can't count it in your enterprise value with reliability, and you're not getting any points for that. Now, you're also not being held accountable with respect to any performance requirements, but whatever, it's definitely a contention in the contract.
Yeah, I mean, think about it this way: because spots are not assigned, if you can't take declines on them, so you can never have issues with declines, and you can't have service failures on a spot. So you only can have service failures or availability failures if you are operating on something that is assigned or unassigned. But it has to be in the contract and attached to your tractor. So if it's not attached to your tractor, then you can't really have declines and service failures. Now, there is a caveat in the contract that specifically discusses using a spare tractor and having an accident in it, and that covers that. I think they specifically put this into the contract to cover the event of a contractor having a tractor doing a spot and getting into an accident. But in general, you can't accrue points on it. You can't take service failures, and it can't take availability failures. Okay, so Section 10 talks about point accruals and deductions for performing runs in assigned spots. Okay, so as I just mentioned on the previous slide, all tractors associated with an assigned run or an unassigned run position and listed on Schedule A accrue 1 point each operating day as long as the TSP doesn't have a service decline or a service failure. So if your tractor runs 5 days a week, you're still going to get credited with 7 points a week and 365 points a year. Okay. Now, if you notify FedEx that you're taking a decline, you're going to lose 1 point. Okay. So if you have a team run that runs once a week, from say Woodbridge to California and back, then you can only take 1 decline that week. You don't get a decline every single day. Now, if you have a solo run that runs between say Olive Branch and Memphis, and it goes out 10 times a day, you could conceivably get hit with 10 declines, though I've never seen it happen. But something to keep in mind, every single time you decline a dispatch, you can get hit with a service decline or availability decline. Now, service failures means when your packages do not make it to their destination on time. So if you are driving along and you actually have a mechanical failure in your tractor, and because of that mechanical failure, your load doesn't make it to the destination on time, FedEx can assess you with 200-point service failure. Now, you cannot be assessed a service failure if it's because of traffic, weather, or maintenance issues on the trailer. FedEx may try to, but you have the right to dispute that with BDS and go through the optional dispute. Every single time it's ever happened to me, I've always been able to fight it and fight it successfully.
Let me just say the best way to fight that is to prevent it from occurring in the first place. Not that you can prevent breakdowns, but when it happens, if you get caught in traffic, if you get caught in weather, if you have trailer issues, you need to proactively communicate that fact with FedEx, document who you talk to. I like doing things by email and phone just because you can track it that way, or by text. But you need to get some verification that they received the notification. And then you can fight off that before they ever start to do it. Once it's on there, it's just more of your time, right? And we talked last week about how you spend your time is an indication of your strategic focus in your business. So proactively manage those things as they go along, and they will cost you a lot fewer management cycles.
Yeah. Okay. So how can you lose points? Okay. So I've never seen it happen, but FedEx has the ability in the contract, section 10.3, to deduct points for CSA violations. I've never seen it happen, but they have that ability in the contract. Like we just talked about, service failures. You will lose 200 points each time a TSP experiences a service failure. Accidents. You can lose 250 points for a preventable accident that is DOT recordable. Okay. So it has to be preventable, and 2, it has to be DOT recordable. Okay. If the accident is not preventable, or if the accident is not DOT recordable, then you're not supposed to lose points in that event. And you have the right to contest it, and you will more than likely win if you quote section 10.3 of the contract back to BDS. Now, you can get 50 points if you conduct a recovery. Now, you only get the 50 points if you conduct a recovery and those trailers make service. So if you conduct recovery and the trailers don't make service, you will get kudos from FedEx for conducting the recovery, but you will not get any points. However, if you go out and recover trailers that, from a tractor that's broken down and you make service, then you'll be awarded 50 points that you can assign to any tractor of your choice. Okay, how can you lose your run for service failures? You will forfeit an assigned run if availability drops below 90% on a rolling 12-month basis. You will forfeit an assigned run if service drops below 99% on a rolling 12-month basis. In each instance, you will be given an opportunity to cure per the TSPA. So what does that mean? You will get notified in writing that you are required to provide you are in breach of the contract, your availability or your service have dropped below 90% or 99%, and you will have 45 days to respond in writing back to FedEx. And then you will have, you promise over the next however long it takes that your availability, that you will not take any more declines, or you will not take any more service failures until you get back above 90% or 99%, and then the clock restrikes and reticks. So say that you had so let me try to put this in terms that everybody can understand. Say you have an assigned run that you've had drop down to 89%. In that event, the senior line haul manager will contact you and say, hey, you're having availability issues. I need you to submit an opportunity or a letter to cure. Okay. So you will provide assurance back to FedEx that you're going to fix this. You have 45 days from the date of your notification to respond back to FedEx in writing. Not in an email, but in writing. So you actually have to put it on your company letterhead and email it back to the line haul manager and BDS within 45 days. At that point, the clock starts ticking. Okay, you cannot take any more declines. Once you get back above 90% and you're 90.01% on your availability score, then you've cured that situation and your clock starts ticking again. So then you can take another failure and drop back below 90%. And then you'll have to provide another letter to cure, and then you can't have any more declines. One thing to understand, in solo runs, it's really quickly and very easy to move back into availability above 90%. For team runs, especially on the unassigned run rotation, it takes a very long time to move back above 85% once you get into that. So in that time period, you will have to go months to get your tractor back above the unassigned run rotation, because team runs, the declines happen so infrequently. You have to really be working hard to get declines. And then you have to really be working hard to get yourself down below 85%. So one thing to make sure you understand, assigned runs is 90%, unassigned runs is 85%. Transferring and forfeiting accrued points. Okay, if you lose an assigned run, if it's terminated, if it's eliminated for business reasons in FedEx, you can transfer the tractor to a URP if position is available. FedEx does not have to make it available to you. They more than likely will. But some terminals might not want to have, if for business reasons they lose a big enough contract, and they decide to eliminate 3 or 4 assigned runs, they do not have to offer all those TSPs a position on the URP. In that event, you have the ability to convert your tractor into a spare with points, or you can convert the tractor into a spare and transfer the points to another assigned run or another URP. Now, to clarify though, this is only if you lose an assigned run for business reasons. If you lose the assigned run or the unassigned run for availability or service failures, you'll lose all those points. So keep that in mind. My suggestion to you is that if you're having availability issues and you're worried about trying to provide availability to FedEx, and you're getting close to either 90% or 85%, and you just cannot for some reason find a driver, my suggestion in that environment, especially on the URR, you don't want to lose all those points that you've worked so hard to grab, is to take a mutual pause. Now, if you transferring points for sales and assignments, the clock restrikes when an acquisition occurs. Okay, all points assigned to an assigned run or URP will transfer during a stock sale, or to an asset purchase agreement, or a partial assignment. Also, all pending deductions, for accidents and service failures, will transfer over at the time of the sale assignment as well. Okay, Schedule C. We're skipping Schedule B because it's pretty self-explanatory. There's really nothing to talk about there. That's where all your tractors assignments are, and that's where all your where the statement of lease is generated from. So otherwise, there's nothing really to talk about there. Schedule C, the settlement week. Okay, the settlement week runs from midnight Saturday until 23:59 Friday. Okay. Section 3, paid miles. TSPs may use whatever route they choose, but FedEx will only pay the FedEx designated standard route or the FedEx authorized alternate route. Okay. The standard route or the alternate route are available prior to dispatch. You can get them printed out if you need to. They're also on MTA. And then, as we are aware right now, FedEx reserves the right to change the standard alternate routes upon reasonable written advance notice. By my experience, okay, so if you have a weather issue or a traffic issue, as Tim has mentioned before, you can request alternate routing. I do it all the time when I go through the mountains. If there is a snowstorm occurring, I always document it and get it put into email so that I can get paid for those additional miles. Tim, did you have something to say?
I did. There's been a change going on out there that I did not know about. And Alex, I don't know if you did, but FedEx is re-engineering every run in the network. And they are looking for the opportunities to stay on a truck route and reduce the number of paid miles. And it's happened to a number of guys across the country. They might change this run 20 miles each way, so that's 40 miles a day. So now that's 240 miles a week you're not getting paid. And it's happening everywhere. And so you don't be surprised if it happens to you. And they're using this provision to do that. They can re-engineer this, make some minor changes to the routing. And you're like, why would they care about changing my route by 5 miles? It's not by changing your route 5 miles. It's about changing 15,000 routes by 5 miles.
Yes.
Right. And so when we talked last week about FedEx transforming every piece of the business on the line haul side, this is one example. And as I mentioned to you last week, they are not considering the impact on your business. The risk in this business has gone up because the FedEx constant has changed and they are no longer predictable. So you have to run your business and be aware that there's more risk in your business there was in the past, and you have to account for that. But I just want to point that out. It was something I learned this past week, and it's going to spread across the network, I suspect.
Okay, so one thing to be aware of this, okay? So FedEx cannot, or you have an argument to make with FedEx if you assess that the routing changes that they've made are more dangerous or less safe. So say that you had a run that went from point A to point B and it was always on highway miles. And say they decide that, you know what, they can save, 20 miles by having you run on a single road along that route that might be less safe for you. You have the case to make to FedEx that I understand that you want me to go on this new route, but if it's less safe and you can prove it through either DOT records, the DOT records where accidents occur most frequently. If you want to prove by pictures that it's too narrow to drive a tractor trailer down, or if it's not paved, you have the right to and the ability to make that case back to FedEx. And you might, I'm not going to say you will, you might be able to win the argument and get back to your original routing. I've seen it happen, especially with routes going through Missouri. FedEx likes to, there's not a lot of, there are a lot of U.S. highway, there are a lot of state highway runs that go through Missouri that are not always the safest route. And so you might have the ability to argue with FedEx that it makes more sense and it's safer and there's less accidents potentially if you were to stay on a highway instead of going on a route or a state highway. Okay, variable miles settlement. Okay, this is, as all of us contractors already know, this is how they calculate what we're paid. It's the VMR multiplied versus the standard or alternate route. You have the ability to look in MGBA for the table for both solo and team runs based on your domicile or tractor. We also agree, as per section 4.3, that parties agree that FedEx may, in its discretion, increase the VMR for a station hub upon advance written notice. The language in the contract clearly states that they do not have the ability to reduce the VMR. There is actually no language in the contract that says they can reduce the VMR. They can only increase it. FedEx agrees to pay TSPs a per fuel mile rate for the paid miles associated with each trip leg. Fuel prices are determined on the average weekly cost per gallon of fuel based on the FedEx fuel station price at location of purchase or the average diesel wholesale price for that zip code. This is known as OPIS, or Oil Price Information Services. So FedEx is only going to reimburse you for, the cost of the gas at their fuel island or what the OPIS price is for where you purchase gas. That's why it's so important, if you're a contractor, to get an REL card so that you can buy gas at OPIS at the FedEx fuel island, at TA, Petro, Flying J, and Pilot. FedEx will not reimburse you if you're paying OPIS Plus. They will only reimburse you up to OPIS. Now, while FedEx does not require you to use a T-Check card, it's highly recommended that you do. But in the event that you don't use a T-Check card, you agree to submit any manual fuel receipts. Okay. Now, fuel mile settlement. If your tractor runs less than 1,800 miles during a settlement week and no fuel transactions are recorded, FedEx will use the previous week's fuel mileage calculation for settlement purposes. Now, if no fuel transactions are recorded for 2 consecutive weeks, fuel mile settlement will not be paid. If a tractor runs more than 1,800 miles during a settlement week and no fuel transactions are recorded, no fuel miles settlement will be paid until fuel transaction date and receipts are submitted to FedEx Ground. So, if you run less than 1,800 miles a week and you don't submit any receipts, or there's no T-check transactions, you will get paid off of base of last week's business. If you run more than 1,800 miles and you have no T-check transactions or don't submit any receipts, you will not get paid until you submit those transactions. Now, if you subsequently report fuels transaction, FedEx agrees to make a TSP fuel mile settlement. By my experience, you still need to submit a settlement adjustment because a lot of times FedEx won't capture those.
It's important to note that there is a formal settlement adjustment process for missing dispatches, but there is not a formal settlement adjustment process for missing fuel surcharge. Most of the time, the stations have no idea what to do. Even the hubs, many of them don't have any idea what to do. So you got to stay after it. You typically have to go to the senior manager to get attention on that issue.
Yeah. Okay. So your miles plus rate. So this is a change from the previous contract to this new contract. We all have a mileage plus rate. In general, the way it was explained to me in my understanding at the Orlando Forum is that the mileage plus rate is a standard rate for all contractors of what FedEx assumes or estimates that all contractors bear to operate their business. So these are all the same cost that all contractors have. Paying taxes on their business. We all pay the same organizational fees in general. So we all pay the same, think about operational businesses as opposed to like cost of living. So think of VMR more as a operating business adjustment based off your location. And NPR is just the standard cost that all businesses incur to operate in the United States. Just like VMR, we all have an NPR table. And that can be found in MGBA. And FedEx, in this case, as opposed to VMR, FedEx has the ability to adjust up or down the NPR upon reasonable written notice. And then FedEx has the right to revert the NPR to previous levels with 7 days notice. As mentioned back previously, it's now contractually required for you to break down and hook up sets. The rate that you get paid at, if you're bobtailing, you don't get paid anything for D&H. If you're pulling one trailer, you get paid $11.75 for each drop and hook that you conduct. If you're pulling two trailers, you get paid $20 for each drop and hook that you conduct. And if you're pulling triples, you get paid $27. Okay, tolls. This is very important to understand. And I get this question asked a lot. Okay, FedEx agrees to pay any tolls incurred on standard and alternate routes. Even if you don't have a toll transponder, they agree to pay any tolls incurred on standard and alternate routes. You as a contractor agree to pay all tolls incurred on unauthorized routes. So unauthorized tolls. So if you happen to decide to take a shortcut to go someplace and incur tolls on that route, FedEx will not reimburse you for those. As a TSP, you agree to use FedEx provided toll transponders instead of your own transponders. That's the VM. I think it's VM011 is what we have to assign to receive our tolls transponders. If you as a contractor charge an unauthorized toll to an FXG transponder, you agree to reimburse FedEx. That's a chargeback that you'll see come through MGBA. If you happen to have a non-functioning toll transponder, FedEx will reimburse the TSP if a toll transponder ceases to function upon submission of a settlement adjustment, including receipts. If you lose your toll transponder, or if it can be proven that you've damaged it through negligence, FedEx can invoice you to replace or repair that toll transponder. Tim, any questions there? Point-to-point flat rate settlement. FedEx has the right to pay a point-to-point flat rate. So FedEx will do this, for example, if they're trying to, actually, Tim can actually speak to this probably from experience, but it's only 19 miles saved between Memphis and Olive Branch. FedEx might be struggling to convince contractors to do shuttle runs between the two terminals. And so they might decide to pay a flat rate in excess of what the standard per mile rate would be in order to encourage or incentivize contractors to run that. Tim, do you have any experience with that?
Yes, they will occasionally do that. For a while, they were using Schedule J to make that business even better for contractors, but there was some misapplication of the Schedule J out there, so they canceled it network wide, and now contractors can't take advantage of that situation to be properly compensated. But yes, they do that, and of course, all spots are paid at a flat rate.
Yeah. And if you have an assigned spot rate, then FedEx is supposed to post what the spot rate is. Sorry, if you have an assigned spot, then the rate associated with that assigned spot is supposed to be posted on MGBA.
And it is typically. One thing to keep in mind is if sometimes FedEx will organize spots in a way where they give it to you as an en route spot. So in other words, we're going to send you from the station to the hub via a spot location. So in other words, that's called a DPU. They want to take that trailer from the spot location directly to the hub, and it never comes back to the station. And that gets paid a little bit differently, right? It gets paid line haul miles. So you get paid line haul miles instead of a spot rate from the station to the spot location to the hub. So sometimes that will come up. It typically works out to your advantage. That's what I found, particularly if it's a little bit longer. But at any rate, that can happen as well.
Yep. Premium settlement. Okay, so on MGB, if you go to the drop down menu on MGBA, not MGB, and you type in premium settlement, you'll have the ability to find both what the premium settlement rates are and what the premium settlement dates are. I actually just happened to look this morning because I was curious if Easter was considered a premium settlement date. Right now, they've posted that Memorial Day and the 4th of July are premium settlement dates. Easter is not a premium settlement date. But they will post what the premium settlement rates are as well. There is a different rate for teams and solos. In my experience, it's not very different. I think one is set at like 38 cents. The other one's set at 39.7 cents. And those are for any miles that are incurred while you're dispatched over the settlement period. So like I explained here, if you happen to be on a team run that goes over the 4th of July, say you get dispatched on July 2nd and you return on July 5th, all those miles from July 2nd to July 5th are considered premium or are eligible to be awarded premium settlement rates. And it, most importantly for teams, this means that it goes from the point that you're dispatched out of your home terminal until the point that you return. So if you do a run from Woodbridge to California and you happen to go over the 4th of July, then the miles will be, everything that's eligible is from the date that you leave Woodbridge until the date that you return back to Woodbridge.
But look, I really appreciate Alex. He spent countless hours going through the contract. He and I talked some, but Alex did 99% of the work. And he's done a really good job of pulling together some really important points. Again, we did a poll, Alex, and 50% of the folks had read the contract all the way through and 50% had not. So clearly this session was a good one to have, and we found it extremely informative. Even for a West Point guy, everybody gave you 5 stars. So, I can't compete with that. So, look, this was an incredibly informative session. And you may still have some more questions that you come up with over the course of time. Please go to the community forum and send those in, and I'm going to collect them there, and we're going to present them in session 4. We'll have Alex back, and we'll do a Q&A about any range of things. And hopefully between now and then, I can find out some more information on spot assignments, and when or if that would ever be contracted. I've had many conversations around that subject, and it's not really ever moved forward. So again, the scale conversation's been going on for 5 years that I know of, and I think maybe in the next contract is when we're going to see it. But a whole lot of this transformation things that you've seen or heard of over the past few months, you can see where in the contract FedEx had given themselves some opportunities to make those moves. And it's going to be extremely important that you read the contract closely. The next contract will have more levers in there that gives FedEx the room they need to maneuver on this transformation. There will be more things that change. And so it's really important you stay on top of these things. And we appreciate everybody being here today. I think this webinar series is going to be great for line haul contractors. Next week, again, we're going to have Matt here, and we're going to go into an in-depth view of how does Wall Street see FedEx, and what is this drive focus? In other words, the transformation. How is that seen, and what are the expected results? Again, if you haven't done so, you should go spend some time and look through the news reports of FedEx earnings announcement last week. They improved profit, but not because they did more business, right? This transformation, they are ahead of their projections in terms of cost reductions, and that gave them a higher earnings per share, which is all just accounting. The reality is that the business was lower, and year over year it was lower. So again, I said in that first meeting last week that I don't expect us to recover to even the April 2023 volume, and their earnings announcements is reinforcing my position on that. They made more money, but they did it on less revenue, and ground went backwards in revenue year over year. So you should pay attention to those things. It's one of those ideas I shared with you last week to understand where your customer is and what they're going through, because that will inform you on how you should run your operation. So again, next week, same time, same channel, we're going to talk to Matt and another Wall Street guy. Alex is a Wall Street guy. These guys bring really, really high level expertise on what we're doing in this business. We hope to see you next week. Again, see you in the community forum as well. And we appreciate you guys attending today. Thanks again, Alex.
Thanks, Tim. I really appreciate it. Highly recommend to join with Matt next week. Matt is a real subject matter expert on both UPS and FedEx, and can talk about the differences in the business and where he sees FedEx going forward. If you enjoyed listening to me, I'm actually doing a webinar tomorrow afternoon with Route Consultants. Please join us on YouTube. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to me, or I look forward to speaking with Tim and Matt in session 4 and answering any questions you guys might have then. Thanks, guys.
You guys take care.